welcome to this live. As you know, we do once a month a live webinar on different topics. This time, the topic I have about some questions regarding ego, which I would like you to reflect on. The first question is: we are all familiar with that ego causes a lot of suffering in our life. For example, all the sense of inadequacy, hurt, uh, you know, inferiority. These are all ego related issues. So, if ego is the cause of so much suffering in life, then why don't we drop it? Because anything that causes us suffering, we get rid of it. So, why don't we get rid of ego? That's my first question. My second question is what is the relationship between love, whether it is romantic or otherwise, and ego? Are they in any way related? If they are related, what do you think is the relationship between the two? So my third question is, have you ever met a person who doesn't have an ego? Is that a possibility? Can a person be alive without being an ego? And the fourth question is, what is the connection of enlightenment and ego? If, as we say, enlightenment means egolessness, so what are the signs of enlightenment, or what would be life without ego? So these are some of the questions I would like you to consider, and also I would answer these questions as we go along. Uh, you see, even in our spiritual, it is actually very deeply connected to the philosophy and our spirituality, and most of the religious texts are dealing with it. For example, in Guru Granth Sahib, it is very clearly written that home dirag rog hai, and it is a very enduring disease. And so they have also mentioned how you can get rid of this ego. Is in that it is the surrender. Surrender is the answer to getting rid of ego. But I have tried this method and I have failed. I don't know whether it is possible because how surrender happens. So the solution lies somewhere in that. But can you surrender? Is it possible? If it was that easy, then all of us would have surrendered and gotten rid of our egos. Is it as simple as that? No. Even in the Bible, it is written that it is the humble who inherit the earth and stuff like that. So it is this issue has been dealt with all the religious scriptures and down the ages since the dawn of civilization, since ever man walked on this earth, this ego has been the issue. So that's the real question. Is now I tell you there is a theory of loss aversion in economics, and it says that if you have a profit of 500 rupees, the joy would be, will the joy of 500 rupees profit equal to the pain of loss of 500 rupees? Because the rupees are just 500 in both the cases, or the same amount of money, or same amount of whatever loss you have. Or for example, gain of one friend and versus the loss of friend, will it be the same? Well, the loss aversion theory says that the suffering of losing 500 rupees is double the in intensity compared to the joy of gaining 500. I may say sometimes even three times the intensity of suffering. The quantity and quantity of suffering is 2 to 3 times more than the joy of getting the same amount of things. So this is called the loss aversion theory. Now, if there is a now, why I am connecting it with the ego? Well, you'll be wondering why this. What has this got to do with ego? Well, it has got a lot to do with ego because all the joys, most of our delight and excitement and happiness also comes from ego. For example, you achieve what is difficult to achieve. For example, you get it in some good college, or if you make some money, or you get some important role, or etc. etc. So you feel happiness. The happiness is of the ego. It is the ego which feels satisfied and happy and is bloated when. So all the happiness, and if you lose the same thing, the suffering is also of the ego. So anything that gives you joy, maybe when you receive something, it is of the ego, and anything, the suffering that is caused to you because you lose something is also of the ego. If there is no ego, there is no joy and there is no suffering. So it's actually a head and tail. If you have to get rid of the suffering, you have to get rid of all the joy. And that is the reason that ego cannot be dropped. That is the reason that people are not able to let go of the ego because it is the cause of all the pleasures or joys in life. Most of them, not all, but most of them. So if it is a, double-edged sword that works both ways. If it has got head and tail, it is like the coin. You cannot have only head. You have to have the tail side also of life. So ego is there. Then, so now I have told two things. I have said that the suffering caused by ego and joy is also caused by ego. But I have also said that there is a loss aversion connection. The pain of suffering is much more than the joy of. So, are we able to observe this in our life? Or if we look at our life, are we able to see this? The moment, now this is the solution I am telling you, this is the surrender that perhaps it is talked of in Guru Granth. When there is a keen perception and you are able to see it in a crystal clear manner that all the suffering that I am experiencing is double the amount of all the pleasure I am getting out of ego, then the ego drops itself. You don't drop it. It is the ego that drops itself. That is what is enlightenment also. That's the time of enlightenment. So, but can you survive without ego? No, you cannot survive. You have to get up. You have to take care of the body. All this is because of the ego. You have to maintain your health. You have to take proper food. You have everything. So that ego. So even enlightened masters have enough ego to help them survive and move through this world in a effective way. So if I have seen some people without an ego, then then you don't want to eat food, then you don't want to go anywhere. Like I saw it in the case of Anandmay Ma or some other enlightened masters. So then other people take care of you. But so that that is an extreme state of egolessness which lasts for maybe a little while. But you need this ego to survive in this world. Uh, has anybody joined in this live session? Some people have. Okay. So are we getting some questions? Are there some questions? Is कुछ questions भी पूछ रहे हैं कुछ जवाब आ रहे हैं लिख के? Okay, doesn't matter. So that is you remember this loss aversion theory, and you remember the keenness of perception required so that the ego drops itself. So if there is somebody who has to drop it, that still remains. It's a paradox. You cannot, as an ego, you cannot drop yourself. Okay, so it drops by itself, and so the ego is not eliminated, but its influence on the life is reduced because you realize that all the suffering is caused by ego, and therefore in a way, its influence and hold on you as a person, as this ego, is reduced, and that is all is possible as a human being. Beyond that, it is not possible to be totally free from ego. So now I have asked the second question that what is the relationship between love and ego? I tell you, ego. The more egoist a person, the less love he or she will find in life, and more lonely that person is likely to be, because they are opposite to each other. The more loving you are, the less ego you will have. The more egoist you are, the less loving. They say ना ये इश्क आग का दरिया है और डूब के जाना है. So डूब के जाने का मतलब ही यही है. The meaning of that is that you can't have ego. Yeah, even you have heard of ये जो मोहब्बत है ये उनका है काम मर जाए मिट जाए. So you have to have that kind of a low ego to be able to have a real success in that love. So even otherwise in the family, the more egoist you are, the less love you will have, and the more lonely you're likely to be. Now I come to the how ego is involved. Supposing you see the people who are very successful and very rich or very powerful or have very important roles or have very big degrees or say MD, etc., etc., whatever boosts their ego. You will find there are a lot of conflicts these people have with other egoist people. So the loss of humility because you acquire ego because of your worldly success makes you get involved in a lot more conflicts and you become a lot more stiff, and you're not able to flow freely in life because you have such ego to protect yourself. Your self image becomes so stiff, you have to protect it, you lose your fluidity and you get into a lot of conflicts. So that is also the flip side of success, worldly success, because then it makes you stiff and egoist. If it does, if you are very intelligent and you are free from Zen ego, that's a separate matter. So that's why even if you are not very successful, you should be grateful because that is keeping you humble and that is avoiding you a lot of suffering, conflicts, and useless stiffness. You can flow freely. You don't have any images to protect, and you are very fluid. So I have what I call as a paradox of ego. Generally, big people have small egos, and small people have big egos. You see, even ordinary people, they will have so stiff egos. Hey, we are like this, we are like that. They talk so much about themselves. So that's the paradox. And you see saints, they are so humble. You can't even recognize they are so good. They are so great. They live in such a simple and humble way that you can't even recognize they are great. So that hides their greatness. So big people have very small egos and small people have very big egos. That's the paradox of ego. So even if the word is not making you interpreting you as a successful person, be grateful because then you have less ego and you can move around the world in a more fluid way and easy. So being an ordinary is extraordinary actually. If it's a gift, so if you are ordinary, don't regret it that you are ordinary. You should be happy that you are no burden of ego to carry on yourself. So that is another thing. Now, uh, I just yesterday night I was listening to Zen stories on the YouTube, and there was one story that there's a one Zen master living on the outskirts of the village, and there was this young girl in the village, unmarried girl, and she got pregnant, and the parents asked her who is the father of this child, and she wanted to protect her lover, and so she took the name of this young Zen master who was living on the outside. So these parents come and they get very angry, and he says, "Is that so? ऐसा है." And then when the child was born to that lady, that young girl, they came and gave this child to this young Zen master, and he brought up this child very nicely for 1 year. He was taking care of him, brought milk for him, and took care of the child. And after 1 year, when this girl saw that this Zen master has been, she felt guilty, and she told the parents, okay, he's not the father of the child, but the father of the child is somebody in the fish market, etc., etc. So the parents came and they really felt sorry and said, this child is not yours. And is that so? Okay, take away the child. So that is the kind of egolessness does to you. So you have no expectations from the world, no worry about what people will say, nothing, and you live a very simple life. So that is, I want to tell you another story. It's related to my own life. I had met a very great saint when I was about 20, 21 years old, and I used to go to him every. So sometimes I would get a chance to sit with him and talk to him very quietly, and in those solitary moments with him, I would ask him many questions, and at that moment, I had become aware of my ego and its suffering, and I requested him, please take away my ego. And I would ask him many questions, he would answer, but when I would say, take away my ego, the, the only response I would get from him is the silence. And I was wondering for many years that why is it that he never answered this? He never said okay, or he never gave any ashirvad or something like that. but for other things he would be always answering. And then suddenly I realized one day, look, his silence was his response. If the ego says, I take away your ego, can the ego take away the ego? It's not possible. So silence is the only response to this request. So now you ask me, have I lost my ego? No, that's not there. It's not possible, but I understand the dynamics and it has helped me a lot. Hmm? So now, in sum and substance, if I have to tell you, well, there is lightness of humility, no weight of maintaining image, etc., and there's a lot of burden of ego and arrogance. So that is one. Now, the most important thing I would like to say is that the keen perception of this entire dynamics of ego, where you're able to see the lot of suffering that it causes me and lot of pleasure that it provides to me. But the theory of loss aversion, that the suffering is twice the amount of pleasure or joy that it causes me, that keen perception of the entire dynamics of the ego operating within me and understanding it in the way I have shared with you, that helps to drop the ego. So that is how I understand it, and that's how you can live the life in a very light and simple way without bothering about what people think about you and what. And you are humble. You say sorry. You ask for forgiveness. You don't get into unnecessary ego conflicts with other people on the road and road rages, etc. You avoid all that. Isn't it beautiful? Well, home Dheerag road hai. It's a very long enduring road, and the solution is, I think, the keen perception of this entire dynamic. And for in able to have that keen perception, perhaps we require a lot of mindful awareness, and that is what a meditation helps us to achieve. And so that is my solution. I don't know because I'm not able to see the camera and see the comments that people are making here. Are there any comments? There are no comments. So with this, I would like to end and thank you very much for participating. And we are going to share this recording with you. And please feel free to comment even after uh, on the recording, and I will respond to you. With this, I would like to end. Thank you very much and all the best. Thank you very much. Bye.